Welcome to the chaos sector. We enter the political matrix. Some have wondered, what trick does the Democratic Party have up their sleeve? Nevertheless, there will be another tribal divide between the country. Zombies foaming at the mouth, insulting each other, threatening each other, attacking each other, in support of politicians that aren't even in control. Imagine defending someone or something that doesn't exist, like Grandpa Joe, and Trump for that matter. Will Grandpa Joe be the candidate? Or will it be Kamala Harris with the unexpected expected grand entrance from behind the circus curtains? Maybe she'll stop puffing on the laughing gas and get serious. I mean, we all know Harris was in La La Land the entire time of the administration. Look at those eyes. She is clearly stoned out of her mind. We all have been there at some point. Some are still there. And the way she behaved, she was puffing on the best marijuana California could offer. In fact, there's probably a new strain of marijuana named after her. The Harris bud, the OG Kamala, or the VP strain. You've never seen a vice president or anyone holding the seat of power appear so, quote, pleasantly sedated. Her facial expressions clearly indicated that she was in her own world throughout her term as a vice president. All of them are drug addicts, if you ask me. Or would it be Gavin Newsom? Speaking of psycho, there's something familiar about Newsom's demeanor. Let's see, I got it. Christian Bale in his role playing American Psycho. Not really by resemblance, but there's a vibe about Newsom that's similar to Bale. Clean-cut, sophisticated, has the charisma in the public eye, but is a completely different person in the shadows. They even have the same slick-back hairstyle. So, we'll just call him Psycho. Psycho is the governor of California currently, and there are rumors he will be running for president. If he did, he would get eaten alive in a presidential debate. How? Well, just take a look at this madness. The state of California is literally in shambles. It's like a nuclear bomb right into the state. And guess why the cities look that way? That's right, protesting, rioting, and looting. Politicians push the woke agenda. Then after the smoke settles, their cities become a scene out of Escape from LA. Quite fitting, because individuals are actually escaping California. I guess the Hollywood producers predicted the future. The same with New York, Seattle, Portland. The woke agenda destroyed those cities within a span of a few days. Boarded up windows, graffiti-stained walls, trash everywhere, human feces, homelessness skyrocketing, gang wars, drugs, murders, vandalism, border crossing through the roof. What has Newsom done to prevent any of this? What has Bill de Blasio, Eric Adams, Ted Wheeler, London Breed, Brandon Scott, Steve Adler, Kirk Watson, Bruce Harrell? Yeah, these are all Democratic mayors and cities that have been literally decimated by riots and violence. These individuals have let their towns be burned down. Think about how those cities have been destroyed, which mayors allowed to happen. Then they were left with tons of abandoned buildings, because business owners decided to run for the hills. Those elected officials should be voted out of office by the residents. Only thing is, most of the tax-paying residents have decided to leave. And what would you be left with? Desolation, an entire downtown of silence, just the frequent argument between several homeless residents, as another sits on the bench, breathing in the fresh smell of urine right next to them. But hey, the mayors and governors could just ask for more money from the government to rebuild the cities, right? I mean, why not? After all, it's not their fault they let the cities burn to the ground. Giving in to the woke agenda, to political virtue signal to your pretend adversaries, letting young spoiled brats destroy a significant percentage of revenue for the city, and lose great hard-working taxpayers. The ish happens, right? Yet, Newsom is always seen with that entitled smirk on his face. The young women may have a crush on you. You may party with celebrities at your winery. But the state you govern is a dumpster fire. How can you convince Californians of anything, let alone on the national scale? We all remember the greatest hypocrisy of these elitists. During the pandemic, they were living life as usual, enjoying the finer things. Newsom spotted at a restaurant, no masks, surely not 6 feet of distance here, breathing, talking, germs just flying around, right? Rules for thee, not for me, nor anyone else in my elite circle. How can you force Californians to follow protocol, shut down the state, massive unemployment, required to wear masks out in public, social distancing, when you and your circle don't follow that same protocol? The highest order of hypocrisy. But in their press conferences, they convinced the residents they were living in a real-life Resident Evil movie. I also find it ironic that it is the sanctuary cities that had the most destruction. Many ask the questions, if there were protesting about an injustice, why burn down buildings and loot businesses that had absolutely nothing to do with it? Because it was about destroying, then resetting, then rebuilding. They want those cities to be, quote, for people of color, including illegal immigrants. Hence, sanctuary cities. Now you're seeing it being physically developed through so-called architectural design. The architectural design is extreme vandalism, looting businesses, to the point those businesses relocate to safer communities in the city, such as far away on the other side of town, or on the outskirts of the city in a small town. Bulldoze all of the vacancies and build apartments, heck even homes for the new residents. San Francisco's Mayor London Breed proposed a plan called Housing for All. Right off the bat, the phrase housing for all indicates that she proposes to provide housing for individuals who aren't citizens of the country, which essentially makes it a proposition of housing for illegal immigrants. Oh, don't throw the baby out with the bathwater, one might say. But if something is illegal, then it is a crime, and you have to enforce laws against that criminal activity. The border crisis debate. Not going to get into that right now. Yet, I'm going to guesstimate that most of the homeless residents in her city are not illegal immigrants. That says a lot about voting, right? But getting back to the economic aspect here. Why should the federal government give a city millions or even billions of dollars to rebuild when the mayor of that city basically condoned that destruction? In an ideal world, they shouldn't help. But since the federal government is a part of that destruction, they'll dish out billions of dollars. And then that's another problem. These cities and states have received billions of dollars, but have allocated it in a way that allows them to keep the majority of it in their piggy bank. Meaning, $1 billion could be given to a city for, well, the citizens and the communities. But what a mayor would do is allocate huge portions of this money to things such as the police departments, fire department, and pseudo-community centers that do the same thing the local government does. And that's shift money around and away from the obvious problems. Not to say the police departments, fire departments, and community centers don't need those benefits, but it is the citizens who are financially hurting at this moment. I coin it pseudo-community centers, or work, because money funded to these programs and organizations, well, to be honest, doesn't actually do much for the communities it was funded for. I mean, it's evident if you look at the city of San Francisco. A small sample size here. Let's say the mayor of a city receives federal funding, like a Housing for All bill that was passed by Congress, right? Okay, this bill for that particular city was approximately $50 million in federal aid for that city. This funding is for the community development, job training, housing development, shelters, rehabilitation programs, etc. Well, what happens is the mayors mismanage the funding. Staff get paid high wages for lackluster work. Unnecessary positions created to eat up a lot of the direct funding, such as assistant lead directors, assistant head of operations, assistants to the assistant head of operations, program staff coordinator, assistant staff coordinator, assistant resource manager, assistant lead director of community development. I mean, come on, this is over the top. These individuals get paid pretty well, perhaps $40K to $75K in salary, yet most of those positions are not necessary. This is, quote, staff stacking, where there are too many heads and not enough groundwork employees. So what is the result of this staff stacking? Just like any company, if there are too many managers, assistant managers, shift leads, specialists, it leads to an imbalance in the workplace. Sure, you may have enough employees to do the work, but the top-heavy element of that company leads to depreciation, which basically means the value or effectiveness of those authoritative positions continues to decrease over time. The same concept applies with these pseudo-community programs. New positions are created, and the funding simply gets swished around throughout the organizations and programs, with no real effective change in the communities it was designed to improve. Put it in perspective, those new employees get paid a salary that allows them to buy new homes, new cars, and yet this is coming from a job that was created to help the communities. Kinda ironic, isn't it? Keep in mind, it is the mayors and their staff who are responsible for managing that federal funding. San Francisco, Austin, Portland, Seattle, I mean, these are some of the worst places to reside in currently, when not too long ago, they were some of the best places to reside. Homeless people everywhere, and they're getting younger and younger. Why are there so many young people homeless in these cities, you ask?
Well, one word, wokeism. Yep, they went woke and then went broke. Wokeism is basically another word for spoiled, entitled, selfish, arrogant, ungrateful. The list goes on. So a 25-year-old who was in college, working a part-time job, all of a sudden goes woke, drops out of college, loses their job, and sits around whining about how hard life has become, which someone else should be responsible for. They're living in tents downtown, begging for money, doing drugs, prostituting, robbing, scamming, whatever it takes to get by, when just a few years ago, they were pursuing their goals. It makes things 10 times worse when you already have a homeless crisis in America. And here comes a bunch of spoiled, able-bodied youth who increase the numbers. There are people who are truly struggling, fighting drug addictions, trying to find a way to survive day to day, while some 20-year-old chooses to wander around on the streets, whining and complaining about life. Meanwhile, someone much older tells them, quote, "What the hell is wrong with you? Get your ass back in school and make something of your life." They lack work ethic, which leads to a lack of motivation to endure the challenges life brings you. And let's be honest, most of those individuals have no real concern about the issues they protested and rioted about. They just wanted to express their anger about their own failures in life through the form of so-called political activism. The individuals in Antifa, Black Lives Matter, and other groups, they have already been exposed for being paid to protest. Sure, they get paid to protest, but when the money runs dry, as there isn't any, quote, work in their field, they have nothing. Make horrible decisions such as quitting their jobs, thinking they will become professional protesters and rioters. Not realizing that it's temporary work, you work for a temp agency. But of course, it's easy to dupe young people, because it's the epitome of misguided, confused, and brainwashed youth who are used by the opposition.
If anybody was ever designed to kick Nazis' ass, it would be them folk.
I think a lot of people have just come off of the sofa, come out from behind their screens because they realize it's really important. It's really important to oppose these white supremacist Nazis and KKK members.
I literally hold no hate in my heart for any group of people. I would never allow it to happen around me either. I think you guys are doing a great thing to be out here and getting together. I do think maybe you were misled a little bit.
And even whenever we do take those streets or we do things that are considered violent, that's all for the greater goal of just ensuring the safety and security of our communities.
Nazis come off our streets! Nazis come off our streets! Nazis come off our streets!
Citizens who have to take this fight into their own hands by any means necessary.
They were literally here with a buffer between those who were here to harm us.
But video from yesterday suggests that was not always the case.
Okay, I want us to have this discussion.
Okay, all right.
This Trump supporter spent about 2 hours trying to have that discussion, but as soon as police allowed Antifa to enter the park, he was attacked, chased for 2 blocks, and cornered outside a gas station. We never saw any indication that he was inciting violence, and the same goes for this man. He was also pursued by counter-protesters, beaten to the ground, and nearly stripped of his shirt before police could haul him to safety.
Wear masks. Why do you cover your faces?
Primarily it's for our own safety. The far right and the state would have a history of targeting anti-fascists, so we wear masks so that we can't be identified and targeted.
This is pretty powerful stuff. I mean, this is basically like showing what's inside somebody's underwear. This is very personal.
Laura specializes in a practice known as doxing.
These individuals are thugs, violent, and should all be arrested and thrown in jail. Or let them rot in the cities they destroy while everyone else evacuates. and they don't understand the irony of their position. See, in other countries, which are far more strict on protesters, they would not only be thrown in jail, but they would also be, well, beat up by the authorities. Riot police would cover the area with tear gas and would beat them with billy clubs, which hurt. Yes, they hurt. Simply put, if you are willing to riot and destroy public and private property, then get prepared to be physically punished in some form. Political ideologies do not give anyone the right to threaten or attack the opposing position. But once again, this is what the political matrix creates: divide and conquer. If these individuals were truly advocating for rights, freedom, and liberties, then why are they seen attacking innocent American citizens? You're supposed to be fighting the so-called oppressors, which would be the authorities, right? Yet in both groups, being Antifa and Black Lives Matter, and the supporting cast around them, they have never attacked the authorities. Have you ever seen video footage of these groups burning down a police station? Chasing down authorities? Nope, they set a police cruiser on fire and think that's revolutionary. But the actual people harmed are in fact normal citizens. A bunch of cowards, I tell you, because if you were true revolutionaries, then across the United States during that wave of riots, there would have been police stations burned down. I'm not condoning that whatsoever. But if you're going to be tough guys and gals, then do what needs to be done, which would be your social political statement to the oppressors. You should be very lucky you don't live in places like North Korea, the Philippines, or France, where protests usually lead to people being beaten by the authorities. Those authorities do not take lightly to protest or riots. They are eager to club some spoiled brat. But see, this is what pisses a lot of foreigners off about Americans. Those protesters or even rioters are dealing with far greater political turmoil than the average American citizen. You have more rights than they do. Their liberties and rights are limited. And to make matters worse, if they were to burn their national flag, they would be beaten, arrested, and face stiff prison sentences. Heck, in third world countries, perhaps the death penalty. Burning the American flag is burning the nation. America is not the government. America is land, with Americans being the nation of people. If you want to advocate for the overthrow of a tyrannical government, then you attack that target, not the flag. The flag represents the freedom that was fought for, which separates you from citizens in North Korea or China or the Philippines. Sure, there is historical context here, which we will break down some other time. But simply put, if you burn the American flag, you are representing domestic terrorism, which can't be ignored. Anti-American and political advocacy is totally different. One is subject to treason, while the other exposes treason. Anywho, the mayors and governors should be kicked out of office quicker than a liquor, because essentially they enabled this downfall. Trump was right when he said cities are turning into ghost towns, and even describing them as hail holes. They are, let's be honest, no need to be politically correct about a hail hole. At the very least in the political matrix, Trump says the quiet part out loud, and that does have a benefit. So where do those young people end up over time? I'm guessing they start to migrate throughout the country, traveling from state to state, trying to regain some sense of purpose and sanity. But like a spoiled child that throws a temper tantrum, it is the adults who have to clean up their mess. Unfortunately, the adults are throwing temper tantrums as well. This has become savage lands. Without genuine politicians, in mayors and governors overseeing those cities and states, you end up with hail holes and ghost towns. No working class citizen, single or with children, would want to live in a city with constant protest and riots every other month, especially if you consider anyone could be harmed during those protests/riots. We've all seen innocent people just trying to get through, perhaps heading home to their family, yet are being threatened, car windows broken, tires slashed, and forced to abandon their vehicle and submit to a mob of criminals. In some cases, there is an entire family in the vehicle. Yet, they would be arrested and charged with a crime if they fatally shoot someone who was physically threatening them. The insanity. The mob comes into a store, starts to loot and break up the joint, and the clerk physically tries to stop them. And the mob has the nerve to file assault charges against them. And guess what? The courts rule in the mob's favor. Would you want to live in a city that's straight out of an episode of The Twilight Zone? I'm guessing you'll pack up your bags and head for the nearest exit out of town. Leave the city to those who destroyed it. And at this current moment, those cities are struggling to rebuild because a huge percentage of the working class have already left, or in the process of leaving. The only tourists that visit these cities now are individuals who are filming documentaries about the destruction. And like discovering new acres of land in your city, perhaps some are bold enough to rebuild those cities with a new civilization. We call them human beings. This is the chaos sector,